Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. So thinking back, I actually have a story from back when I was a delivery driver for a certain sandwich shop that pretty much doesn't exist anymore. And while there are certainly people out there that won't think of it as creepy, it was certainly messed up and skeevy. It's one of those stupid memories that you wish you could get out of your head, but will not leave. And when you least expect it, bam! Instant revisualization of the situation. And it was not a situation that I wanted to be reminded of frequently. So as stated, I worked at a certain sandwich shop that was known for making their sandwiches toasty, as they would put it. Unfortunately, they don't really exist anymore, or at least nowhere near how they used to. I was 18 when I worked there and was basically the second in command to the manager, mostly because I'd been there for 2 years, which made me the longest employee at that time aside from him. Unfortunately, being what was basically the assistant manager meant that when corporate told us that we were going to do something experimental, I got put on the lead for it. In this instance, we were told that we were going to start doing delivery during what was essentially the dinner hours. Because of this, we would need a delivery driver, and he intended to hire one. But until then, I had to do the deliveries during my shift, and he was going to do them on the days that I was off. I was honestly not happy with this. But since it was so new and wasn't even being advertised yet, it was most likely going to just be people that knew about the locations or regulars. Because of that, I was a little more okay with it, but I was still annoyed. Anyways, after a couple of weeks of doing deliveries, it became pretty clear that the manager wasn't in a rush to hire a real delivery driver. So I was going to be stuck doing it, and I pretty much just accepted that it was my job at that point. And again, most of them were fine. That is until my manager decided that we didn't have enough deliveries and put flyers on every car in his apartment or rental complex and every car in the parking lot of our shared strip mall. Basically, he went hardcore in advertising the deliveries as much as he could, and it resulted in us having more than we could handle, and in places that we'd never got before. This was obviously a mess, and that really pissed me off, but it's also what led to this delivery that stuck with me. This delivery started just like every other one that I'd gone on, except it was to the rental complex where my manager lived, which was basically the absolute farthest that we would go for a delivery. The delivery comes in, I roll my eyes angrily and make the sandwich and tell the 2 other workers that I would be back within half an hour, and if another delivery called in, to tell them that it would be a while. I get in my car and I drive out to what was probably one of the darkest rental complexes that I have literally ever been to. I spend several minutes trying to figure out which townhome this guy lives in, until I manage to spot his number on what is probably the darkest corner of the entire property. To add to this, he didn't have his porch light on, and it didn't look like there were any light on inside. I hesitate to park my car in front of his building and just sit there staring, the main thought going through my mind being that I was about to be robbed. It was way too dark and desolate looking for this to go normal. And after a couple seconds, I just sigh and get out of my car. I then walk up to his door and knock. After knocking, I turn to look back out into the parking lot to make sure that there's no one sneaking up on me. I just kind of stood there awkwardly and stared off into the nearly empty parking lot for longer than I was comfortable with before I was knocking again. This time, there was a response to my knocking. I heard a guy's voice say, "Who is it?" To which I said, "I'm with the sandwich place. You ordered food for delivery?" He then responds asking, "How old are you?" This question was weird. I just responded that I was there to deliver his food, and that was all. He pushed again and asked if I was over 18, and I really wanted out of this situation, so I just said yes, hoping that he would move on. Then, he responds with, "Oh, come on in then," which is not something that I expected nor wanted to hear. I politely informed him that I just needed him to take the order since he had already paid for it, and that I would be good to go. He then again says that I should just come on in so he didn't have to get up. It was at this point that I was legitimately livid. I wasn't going to risk my life and blindly walk into someone else's house just so this guy could be lazy and not get off his ass for his damn sandwich. I responded as firmly as I could without being rude that I could not enter his home, that I needed to get back to the store. Then said that if he didn't want to get up, that I could leave the bag on the porch for him and he can get it whenever it works for him, but I would not be entering his home. Within a second of me saying this, the door opens and it got worse. The guy that answered was standing there and staring at me with a big grin on his face and was completely naked, wearing nothing but a baseball cap and his socks. Obviously, I jumped. I didn't expect to see some dude in the buff come to the door for his sandwich, much less one with such a creepy stare on his face. I turned to look away and pushed this food forward for him to just take it so we could end this ordeal as quickly as possible. This guy then reaches out and seriously caresses my hand with his, then says, "Oh, come on, no need to be shy. You sure you don't want to come in?" I seriously almost puked as soon as he said this. I more or less shoved the bag at him and turned, making a mad dash to my car. And when I started my car and my headlights kicked on, all I could see was him in all his horrifying glory, standing in the doorframe and laughing at me. I pulled out and drove back to the store as quickly as I could, and as I was driving, it hit me even harder about how pushy he was for me to come inside. The whole thing just made my skin crawl. When I got back to the store, I called my manager and informed him of the situation, expecting him to be livid that this happened, much more so for the fact that this guy was practically his neighbor. But much to my surprise, I got nothing more than, "Well, if he didn't hurt you, then we can't do anything about it." I then asked that he be blacklisted from the deliveries, seeing as how he had pretty much attempted to do something, and if nothing else, this was indecent exposure. And to that he said, "I can't really blacklist him, so just be more careful next time." And as soon as he told me that I need to be more careful, I told him to find another assistant manager and that I quit. I hung up, put my hat, apron, and store keys on the desk in the back, and left. I only went back to get my last check, and I didn't even say anything extra to the manager. I was genuinely disgusted that this happened and also angry and hurt that my manager didn't seem to care. It just pains me to think that if I were a little more naive, a year younger maybe, a bit less observant of the surroundings, I may have thought that it was okay to go into this guy's house. And who knows what would have happened to me. It was 11:30 at night, and I'm a 23-year-old female Chinese food delivery driver. I was running the very last delivery for the night on a very busy and hectic hell that we call college football days. We literally run from 11 a.m. until midnight sometimes, and I was extremely tired and frazzled from campus traffic all day. So, after I delivered the last delivery, I pulled up at a stoplight, and I'm turning right at red, and I see my creep's car seriously far enough for me to pull out and pick up enough speed, which I did. So, Mr. Creep and his family, by the way, they were returning from game day activities. I don't know, maybe a barbecue or something. And he decides that he doesn't like that I turned right at red on his watch. He speeds up and then passes me with an aggressive pass. He slows down and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Someone is cranky. I tolerate this slow driving for a minute or two, and at that point, I just wanted to go home. And home wasn't that far, so I got into the left lane. I then sped up and passed him. If I knew what I know now, I'd tell myself to be pretty patient. So now, Mr. Creepy and family are behind me, tailgating me with their high beams on. This old guy seriously doesn't like it when he's been passed up, so he does this for a few miles and stopped. I now assumed that he was good and wasn't going to follow me anymore. But just in case, I caught the tail end of a yellow light, so he would have to stop. Mr. Creep didn't stop, but I was like, meh, you know it's late, cops aren't around, so he'd probably decided he'd get away with it. And at this point, he stopped being an aggressive driver and went back going a safe distance. So I turned into my neighborhood and he did too. I was so tired at this point that I didn't even register it. And I'm used to like 4 or 5 cars pulling in behind me on my street, which has like 6 different individual apartment complexes and is a long stretch of a road. So when I pulled into my own personal complex like an idiot, this guy followed me in as soon as I pulled in. And while he was behind me, I was on the phone with 911 describing everything. I parked by the mailboxes so he wouldn't know my apartment number, and he blocked my car and ran to my window, banged on it, and started yelling at me that I ran 2 stop signs. And let me tell you now, there were absolutely no stop signs from where he found me all the way to my apartment complex. My adrenaline was pumped, and I hopped out of my car, ran behind his, and read out the plate numbers perfectly, and then gave them a perfect description of the mail. Him being pissed off, hopped back into his car, and while whoever was in his car called 911 and showed me on her phone that she was on the phone with them, I was smart and stood behind my plates, because honestly, they followed me home. I'm the victim. He then sped off, and it wasn't until 911 told me to hang up and go indoors that I started shaking and realizing how dangerous that situation could have been. I began sobbing because I was all alone and my boyfriend wasn't home yet, and my brother, who was staying with us that week, wasn't home either. I left my car parked on the street in an awkward angle because I was too shaken to fix it. I ran into my house, called my boyfriend and brother, and begged them to come home. I now have to go see this creep again on Friday for a summary hearing. He's trying to get his harassment side off his record because he works for a really high position at the Ivy League university in the town I live in. I'm honestly not dropping this case, no matter how sorry he is. You don't do that to people. It's harassment, and if I don't teach him a lesson on consequences now, he'll never learn and will probably do it again to some poor little 18-year-old freshman. I have a story that happened a few years back when I was still 19, and I was a delivery driver for a certain pizza place. I won't give the name of the actual restaurant, but I think you can figure out who it is if I call it Pizza House. This happened in what I would call a fairly small town that resided in the suburbs of a much larger city, and I thought it was a pretty safe area up until this point. What happened could have happened to anyone really, but it happened to me because I happened to be the delivery driver that got sent to this delivery. It was a pretty normal night at the Pizza House. We were fairly busy but weren't being slammed too bad. I was one of the 3 drivers that were on the clock that night, and we were busy enough that we didn't get to relax between drives. I remember I was on a double delivery when this took place. And for those that don't know, a double delivery is literally what it sounds like. You're tasked with taking 2 deliveries at the same time, and you basically drive to the closest location and then to the furthest location and back. It's an incredible pain in the ass because you usually end up late to the second delivery and the customers get angry. So, as I said, I had to take a double delivery, and both of them were pretty far from the store. In fact, they were actually on the outer ring of our deliveries. When it came in, I grabbed the bags, put the light sign for Pizza House on top of my car, which was a requirement, and then headed off to the first location. Everything was going normal. I was talking to my girlfriend while the GPS told me which way to go. I was most of the way to the first location when I pulled up to a red light and stopped like I had to. I was complaining to my girlfriend about how much I genuinely disliked being the pizza boy. When I glanced over, I saw a couple of guys crossing the road. I made eye contact with one of them and pretty much just kept talking about random nothingness. And as I was watching the one cross the road, I noticed that the other guy walked a little closer to the lane that I was in, and my mind immediately clicked that something bad was about to happen. I was just sitting there, defenseless at the red light, chatting about literally nothing with my girlfriend on the phone, and it didn't occur to me until it was too late that these guys were up to no good. By the time that it seriously clicked, the guy that was in the lane was pulling on my door handle and shouting that I needed to unlock the door. I thought about slamming my gas pedal and driving off, and I thought about just running the light to get the hell away from this. But then I saw the first guy was standing in front of my car and then pointing a gun at me. I was literally sitting there and staring down the barrel of some handgun on some street that I didn't know, with 2 guys about to carjack me. Well, that's what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were seriously about to rob me, carjack me, steal all the store's cash, and leave me on the side of the road. I even said that to my girlfriend, and I told her to stay on the phone, but not say anything, and that I was being robbed. She quickly stopped talking and did exactly as I asked. I looked back over to the guy at my passenger door. He was shouting at me to unlock the door, and I slowly did as he asked and reached down to hit the unlock button. And as soon as I did, he pulled the door open and grabbed the 2 delivery bags with the pizza, then slammed the door, and the 2 guys ran off. I literally just sat there with my heart pounding and blood pressure seriously spiking hard as I watched the 2 men seriously run off with the food and nothing else. These guys seriously had me at gunpoint for pizza. Pizza! They didn't take my money, they didn't take my phone, my car, nothing. Just about $85 worth of pizza. I even told my girlfriend, between adrenaline-fueled tears, that I was just robbed, but they only took the pizza. I remember her asking if I was serious, and even laughing slightly. I told her that I needed to call the store and tell them. I hung up from the call and then called my manager directly. I told him that I was robbed, and at first he asked if I was okay. But then when I told him that they just stole the pizza, he seemed a bit less serious about the situation. Obviously, I was terrified, and I was seriously thinking that I was going to be hurt or even lose my livelihood. And I'm actually thankful that these guys just wanted the food and decided not to take anything else. So last night, me and my husband went on Weed Maps looking for a new local dispensary to order from because we wanted a first-time patient deal. So, we chose one and ordered from them. They say there's an estimated time of arrival, which is between 45 to 60 minutes. Cool, no problem at all. And just under an hour goes by, and we get a phone call from them. So my husband answers, but the guy on the other end starts going on saying random numbers, and that he knows who he is, and that he's not someone to mess with, and that if we don't give him what he wants, he will come find us and mess us up because he's crazy. So my husband asks if this is the delivery service by name, and the guy just hangs up. So my husband calls back after, and he quickly tells me what happened, and twice it was sent to voicemail. Then the guy calls back right after the second rejected call and acts like he has no idea what my husband is talking about. My husband explains the phone call that he had received, and the guy just said, "Oh, we've been having some issues with that," and sounded a little nervous. He then asked if we had received our delivery yet. We hadn't, so he said he would check on that, and the call was ended as my husband said okay and thank you. So 20 minutes later, we tried calling back to get an update, and both calls got rejected. Then we texted asking for an update on our order, and he responded saying, "It's on its way, 5 to 10 minutes. 20 minutes after receiving the text, he says that he is outside. So, my husband walks out there and I'm peeking through the blinds because my anxiety needed me to make sure that my husband was alright in case the driver was the guy. I then see the transaction happen, and as my husband goes to walk away, I see the guy completely stare at my husband as he did that, even stopping his car that had started to drive away. We both go out onto the porch and my husband tells me that it was the guy from the phone and he knew the guy was staring at him, and he even turned around and looked at him as he walked back. Then, we see the guy's car back up the way he had came and the security truck driving towards him. Then, they both leave the apartment complex. We stayed on the porch because I was super nervous that he would come back, and I was considering leaving a review saying that it was a very sketchy transaction. But I decided not to, in case it would escalate the possible situation. But then he comes back. He comes to an almost complete stop in a way that his headlights illuminated us, and we just watched him as he drove the other direction towards a different building, and he proceeded to park in a spot and back up and change directions in his car a bunch of times, with pauses in between where he was, in the middle of the road even. Then, he drives past us again and doesn't look at our direction. My anxiety needed the situation to come to an end somehow, and I needed to see him leave. But then he drives by again. This time, he is full on staring at us and even turned his head around once he had passed us, and then drove off more into the complex. My husband decides to call the number back, and the guy answers, and my husband says, "Hey, we just got an order from you." And the guy says okay. And then my husband asks him if he was lost or needed directions somewhere. And the guy says no, that he has another delivery in the K building. So my husband said okay, and that was it. We stayed outside for a few more minutes, and we never saw him or heard his car, so we came inside. Lately, my anxiety has been pretty high, but even my husband was weirded out about this, so I don't think that it was just us. And I am sketched out that he has our number and address, because I don't really buy a story at the end there. I worked at Jimmy John's for almost 2 years, and I had a few weird encounters. Once, I delivered to a little rundown motel that was rented out by the week and was mostly inhabited by low-income families or addicts. I had been there on several occasions, and it was nothing special, just someone getting food and then not tipping, as was expected for this place. But the last time that I went was wild. I knocked on the door and the guy opened it, just a crack, and looked through at me and asked who I was. I told him that I was delivering his food, and he opened the door and told me to come in. Not something that I'd like to do, but I figured the sooner I got his money, the sooner I could go on another order and actually make some money. So, I went on. Dude is standing there in his tidy whities, and the place was a wreck, and he had clearly been there a while. He proceeded to stand there and talk to me for about 5 minutes about how the mayor, judges, and the police were all conspiring against him, and that he was hiding out in this motel, and that there was a very deep citywide conspiracy happening revolving around him. Finally, he gave me the money and I left. He has a YouTube page I wish that I could find again, and it had videos that are all 20+ minutes long, ramblings about conspiracy, all while wearing his tidy whities, sitting in that motel room. I haven't worked there in 5 years, but I went in there a few weeks ago and asked if they still had that note on the delivery map saying not to deliver to him, or that motel room number. And they do. Does anybody else here have any weird delivery stories? And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. When I'm ripe, I'm green. When you eat me, I'm red. And when you spit me out, I'm black. What am I? Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.